So, welcome everybody. My name is Caroline Daugstad and I'm the director of NTNU Community. And this session, as you know, is titled Beyond Democratic Resilience in a Digital Society, Challenges and Opportunities. I will just give you a few words to introduce the session and then we move on. So, community and democratic values are key concerns in a rapidly changing world. The European model, as we know it, with its democratic structures, principles of participation and focus on reducing inequality, is under heavy pressure. In her State of the Union address a couple of weeks ago, Ursula von der Leyen stated that it is the Union's mission to decide what kind of society and democracy we want to live in. Digitalization in society is high on the agenda of the European Union, and the European Commission has defined 2020 to 2030 as Europe's digital decade, highlighting the possibilities and challenges associated with digital transformation. This session will pursue the role of digitalization for democracy, participation, and community building, or more specifically, digitalization related to democratic resilience. Digitalization can build online communities, increase participation, uphold or further develop democratic structures and trust. Or, on the other hand, it can reinforce exclusion mechanisms, distrust and disinformation, and lead to democratic erosion. NTNU Strategic Research Area Community is arranging this parallel session. Through interdisciplinary research, NTNU Community aims to contribute to a viable democracy that safeguards the common good, strengthens trust and cohesion across different groups, and reduces exclusion and polarization. Nothing less. It's quite a huge challenge. To understand digital communities, how people are influenced and sometimes also manipulated, is an important part of building European democratic resilience. At the same time, we need to be more than reactive towards threats. We need to explore how we can widen and deepen our democracy. In other words, we need to move beyond democratic resilience. So with those words, I will give the floor to start with to our excellent moderator, Gabi Lombardo, the Director of the European Alliance for Social Sciences and Humanities. And she will take good care of us further. So please, Gabi.
So I'm climbing up here. Thank you so much for being here and to be so numerous. I'm very impressed. We're competing very well with the other session. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to moderate this session. Indeed, we are in a very interesting time, and not talking about society, will be suicidal, literally so. So it's very important that we're having this conversation about the value of our European democracies, what we mean with the democracy in Europe, and what is competition, or what means competitiveness for us from the perspective of a continent which does not believe in monopoly, does not believe in top-down government-led kind of industrial development or industrial strategies. We are a continent that works together, live together, different cultures, different identities, and is developing together. So the 28 regime is very critical. It's very much based on social science research and legal research. And it's very important that we have that reminder. I'm not saying anymore. I want to introduce the way how this session has been structured is we got 3 speakers with PowerPoint, a short PowerPoint presentation that will present some of the fantastic researches going on. So we have 2 researchers from NTNU, Andreas and Christina, thank you for coming, and an overview of the investment in fantastic research has been done under the ERC label. And then we have a panel. We're going to all sit here together. There are some more seats here than there are on the other side, but never mind. We're going to have a panel discussion with 3 incredible people that I really enjoy discussing things with. And we have Simone, who comes from DG Employment. And DG Employment, as you know, is the backbone of our social rights pillar. We have a Mario who works at GRC, and they're doing a fantastic project on democracy and digitalization. And finally, we got Sanna, who works with Stockholm Trio, where translational research is at the core of her mission. So, without saying any more, I'd like to invite Andreas to come first, and thank you very much.
Yes. So thank you for having me, and welcome to the session. Great that so many of you have chosen this track. And I will now talk about democracy in the digital age, and we would just need to get the slides on the screen. Thanks. That doesn't look too good. Yes, perfect. Maybe I can briefly go one back. Anyway, I will talk about perceptions, media integrity, and in both Europe and Norway. At least I try to the extent possible in the time assigned to me. And to set the stage, I had a look at some recent numbers from the Eurobarometer. Many of you may know these numbers, these items. So here, this was a flash Eurobarometer from February this year, especially among the young, 16 to 30. And as you can see, overall, how satisfied are people? Yeah, it's roughly 2/3 are satisfied, very satisfied, and roughly 1/3 is not so satisfied. We can discuss whether these are good numbers, bad numbers, could be better, but for sure could also be worse. And at least from the EU perspective, it's quite nice that the numbers are higher for the EU level compared to the country level. Then, obviously, democracy is not given, right? So at the same Eurobarometer, people were also asked which are the most serious threats in their perception, and then they got this list of these different items, and then they could select, I think, up to 3 answers, but didn't have to. And as you can see, the top answer is here false or misleading information in general, online or offline. And so if you would need a reason to be here, well, here we have it, right? So it is indeed a perceived threat by the people. Interestingly, a sort of related field, so the regulation of technology, so AI deepfakes, which is also related to disinformation, that's rather low on the list, right? So that, at least at the moment, is not perceived as such a high threat. Then zooming in on one of the key components of democracy, namely electoral integrity, I had a look at some numbers from the European election study from last year. And here you see some numbers to what extent people agreed or fully agreed with these 2 statements. The first one, EP elections were held in a fair way. As you can see, yeah, roughly half of the people said, well, that's true. I have to be fair, there are also roughly 30% who said, like, I neither agree nor disagree. So only roughly 20% said it's actually the opposite. But again, numbers might be better. More problematic maybe also the second one here, right? So that the statement, there was disinformation in the media reporting of EP elections, where 40% either fully or partly agreed with that statement. I then was also looking a bit deeper into that by splitting it up according to age. I just grouped it into 4 age groups, 18 to 29, 13 to 44, 54 to 59, and 60 plus. And there, the left side, that may be a bit more concerning, right? Because there we see a gap, right? So the older generations, they agreed much more that the elections were held in a fair way. And the younger generations, much less, right? It's over 10% percentage points difference. While the second statement, relatively equally distributed across respondents. And then I was especially asked to present some numbers from a recent survey we fielded in Norway for the very recent elections earlier this month. We called it the Democracy and Media Survey, and it was an online survey conducted by Verian. And it's actually a two-wave panel study. So one wave before the elections, what I will talk about today. So this we ran in the mid of August. And the second wave is currently still in the field, so I obviously cannot present some numbers from there. We had a bit more than 1,000 respondents. And as usual, there are some biases, but overall it's relatively representative. Just young women and low-educated people are somewhat underrepresented. And the numbers that I will show you, they are not controlling for that. So don't quote me on the exact percentage for these numbers. And in the first step, we were interested, okay, what are people actually using as their news sources, right? And here you see the black bars, always the overall, and then again split up by the age groups. And here you see the percentages that respondents use these different sources at least once per week. And as you see, online newspaper on top, then TV, personal discussion, radio, social media, print newspaper, and the very modern types of sources, so podcasts or AI chatbots are actually at the end of the list. However, interestingly, they may become much more relevant because, again, if you look at the age distribution, I mean, the lightest blue bar is the highest, right? Clearly highest for the chatbots, podcasts. So these news sources may become much more relevant in the years to come, while, for instance, TV, radio, or print newspaper is much lower compared to the older generations. Having said that those two are the least used for the moment, still we were especially interested if they use these AI tools, what are people using it for? So then we asked, no, that was too many. Yes, here. So then we asked, so what kind of usages are there for these tools? And here you see all sorts of options we gave them, and this is again percentages that people use them at least occasionally. And as you can see, they use it to summarize political issues. I mean, all relatively low numbers, right? 12% roughly. Check facts about politics, learn about the parties and their programs, obtain general information about the elections, simplify information that are too complex. And I think these are all ways to use it. We could agree on that, while the last two may be a bit more problematic, so that they really are used to form a political opinion, right, without really doing the job themselves, or even just asking, hey, whom should I vote, right? But yeah, as we also see, it's relatively reassuring that these are the least types of usages. Then we were also asking directly, okay, what kind of electoral threats did they perceive, often linked to these topics. And as you can see, that is now percentages of at least a moderate risk, so in the middle of the scale that we asked them. And you see then top answers spreading fake news on social media, followed by bots that make some content appearing as more important than in reality, bias in social media, fake AI in text, images, etc. And a bit less so that there's a lack of digital literacy among voters, that there are foreign cyber attacks or political bias in editor-controlled media, so the more print news, etc. But again, interesting is also a couple of age differences, so that some of these perceptions are less perceived as problematic among the young, right? They're much lower on spreading news on social media, fake news, or the bots, and also the fake AI. So the younger generation don't perceive them as problematic as the older ones. Having said that, then the main goal was also to, that was again one too many. Yes, we wanted to check, okay, so what is now the state of democracy, democratic support? And we didn't reinvent the wheel, there's tons of research. So here we used a validated scale by a recent study by Klaassen et al. And they had these 7 items, and then people could agree or disagree. We can briefly go through them, covering the main principles of what a democracy entails. The first one, government should be able to censor media that are too critical of the authorities. Now it would be better off if there were only one party. The universal right to vote must be questioned when so many voters are poorly informed and easily misled. Governments are justified in bending electoral rules in their favor when their opponents have also done so in the past. The government should be able to ignore court rulings that are regarded as politically biased. If the Storting, so the parliament, hinders the government's work, the Storting should be ignored, and the government should be able to bend the law to solve pressing social and political problems. As you realize, they are all negative things. So meaning, if you strongly disagree, so higher numbers, 5 means you're more democratic. And then what we did, we formed a scale out of that. So again, that's showing if you have a 1, you're rather undemocratic, and a 5, you're democratic. And here are the numbers, again, spread out by the different age groups. And although you can clearly see the bar for the younger ones are clearly lower than the others, you have to put it into perspective because 3 would be in the middle of the scale, so they're still on the more democratic side, right? But you can also clearly see, I mean, it's, yeah, what is it, 0.8 difference to the oldest generation. So, yeah, there may be potential to improve these democratic attitudes among the very young. And then at the very end, I just have 2 more slides. That's again one too many. Very sensitive. I just plotted it, whether there's some correlation between these democratic attitudes, again on the y-axis, and the extent to what, how often people are using social media. And as you can see, there's not really a clear pattern, right? It goes a bit down in the middle, but we cannot say people using it all the time or never, that they are more or less democratic than the others. In contrast, if we look at the same plot just with AI usage, on the x-axis, there we see a pattern, right? Because there we clearly see the people who never use it or less frequently than all the more often options, they have the highest democratic attitude, so to speak. So, yeah, there may be something that is really first results, relatively exploratory, but I also checked to what extent that is linked to age, because obviously the older people never use them, but that still holds. So even if I control for age, that pattern holds. And this is all I had time for, so thank you, and looking forward to your questions.
Next presentation, we do the questions at the end, okay? Thank you. Christina, the floor is yours.
I'll just get my slides. Yes. Hi, my name is Christina Ask. I'm going to talk about invisible communities. I use qualitative methods as a scientist, so my craft is not numbers or graphs, it's analytical storytelling. And today I have a short analytical story about invisible communities, since we actually believe that communities are important for democracy. When I talk about invisible communities, I am not talking about communities that consist of see-through people, or that communities are invisible to the naked eye. I'm talking about communities that look and act in ways that we don't associate with community and therefore are unable to see. Because this is what we expect a community to look like. You have people standing in the same place, maybe wearing kind of matching outfits and clothes. You can see from their actions, from their movements, from the way they are standing together, that here are people who are sharing something, they belong together, they have something together. However, communities can also look like this. A person sitting alone on the couch with a screen in front of them, doing something that is completely inaccessible to the person looking at them. These are the invisible communities I want to talk about. Because the thing is, talking about internet communities is not new. If anything, we have known from research since the beginning of the internet that what we do there is form communities. However, there is something kind of tricky about studying communities that are mediated by technology. And that is that every time the technology changes, when we move from text to image, from image to video, from networks to algorithms, from discussion boards to platforms. Every time the technology changes, we seem to forget this very simple lesson that people can form communities through technology. And this happens especially when the new technologies is used by people that are younger than ourselves, which is what this quotes allude to. And as a key example of how we ignore communities that is by young people using new technology, I want to talk about TikTok. This clicker is really interesting. Okay, so TikTok is a short-form video app with about 1.6 million users, majority being the age of 18 to 34, and is one of the primary sources of information and access to public discourse for people under 35. If you read a newspaper story about TikTok, there's usually 3 narratives you will find. You will either find a story about someone being famous on TikTok, you will find a story about young kids doing dangerous things because they're following a TikTok trend, or you're finding concern about China stealing our data through TikTok. And while there is some legitimacy to all of these narratives, we are doing a lot of people a huge disservice when that becomes the story about platforms like TikTok, and the communities especially become invisible. In the short space of time I have, I can, of course, not be able to share the many, many things and show the full diversity of communities on TikTok. But I want to give you a sample, a little taste. And what is common for the 3 examples I have chosen is, number 1, that they are strongly linked to offline activities, showing how online communities are interwoven into our daily living. And secondly, these are online communities that have emerged bottom-up, which often means that they surface and make visible experiences and perspectives that have been marginalized. My first example is called Book Talk. This is a side of TikTok dedicated to reading, to the love of books, of getting lost between the pages. Here people make videos about their favorite books, their favorite authors, the books they didn't want to finish and all the reasons they didn't want to finish them, as well as encouraging each other to invite a friend over for a book date where you just read together. And in a time when we're really concerned that people aren't reading enough, especially young people are not reading enough books, and the blame is usually pointed towards social media, it is kind of interesting that Book Talk is, I wouldn't say single-handedly, but at least Book Talk is a huge force behind saving the publishing industry. Not in least because Book Talk are promoting genres that are primarily popular with women, such as romance, erotica, and fantasy. And have been a huge drive for a lot of book sales. My second example is called ADHD Talk. You kind of get the naming convention there, it's not super advanced, right? ADHD Talk is a side of TikTok dedicated to the experiences of living with ADHD. I am very moved by the amount of videos where people say, I thought I was the only person on the planet who had this struggle. I felt so alone, but then I came here and I saw that other people had the same problem, and I realized this might be related to my diagnosis. And here I find actual advice that works because they are based on lived experiences, not about diagnostic criteria. On ADHD Talk, people share their lives, their experience, their hard-won insights. And of course, like other patient communities that exist online or offline, there is problems with disinformation. However, ADHD Talk has been incredibly important in highlighting ADHD in women. Since the diagnostic criteria for ADHD have been targeted to pick up behavior among boys and men, a lot of women have not gotten the diagnosis and the treatment they need. On TikTok, they have found information and relatable experiences that have encouraged them to seek out help that they actually need. My third example is Run Talk. It is a community dedicated to running, about making this activity, which can be perhaps a bit lonely, something shared. Here people motivate each other to go for that run, even though it is raining, to find small victories in improved time, But the reason I want to bring this up is because Rontak, unlike much of the other stories and narratives we are presented with fitness in both on social media and in legacy media, Rontak is not about getting bigger muscles or becoming skinnier or looking better. It is a community that says that you don't need specialized equipment, you don't need to run fast, go at your own pace, because the most important thing is to feel good in your body. A truly wholesome message about health. So, watching a TikTok doesn't mean that you're part of a community. But if you keep logging on to TikTok and you keep watching videos, following the same creators, joining in on trends, reacting to and engaging with these videos, if you do that for a certain amount of time, you will feel a sense of belonging. You feel like these are my people. And if we truly believe that strong communities are key to democratic resilience, we also need to care for these online communities that might not look like what we expect communities to look like. So what do we need? First of all, we need research and innovation. We need knowledge and technical solutions on how to make digital communities safe and strong. And we would expect to have lots of knowledge about this. But the reality is that today, most online communities exist on platforms that are not designed for communities at all. They are designed for shareholders to make money of your personal data. It's a horrible infrastructure to build these otherwise beautiful communities. We also need regulation and political power behind this. I would say the EU, especially in the last couple of years, have made great progress in making sure that personal data in particular and risks online are being reduced. This is amazing work, necessary work. However, it tends to focus too much on the risks and do not see the potential benefits. And there is not enough effort in making sure that these digital infrastructures are good infrastructures to build communities on. So in the end, I want to say, these communities might be invisible, but they are both important and impactful, and they need our attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. And Anne, would you like to close the PowerPoint sessions?
I'm just waiting for my PowerPoint. Here we go. First of all, I also just wanted to say thank you to the organizers for inviting me and being part of this panel. I'm not a researcher myself anymore. I've been in research administration now for plus 10 years, and I work with the European Research Council's executive agency. And I work in a sector called feedback to policy. I'm trying to figure out which one to use. This one. No, that was too much. Here we go. Perfect. Thank you. I work in a small sector that works on feedback to policy. And for those who doesn't know, the ERC funds curiosity-driven bottom-up research. And what was a bit particular with our program was that only later with Horizon Europe, where we also sort of mandated or obliged to also do feedback to policy, which of course looks a bit particular for a bottom-up program. It's more obvious for top-down programs to know who their audience are or their customers, so to say, in terms of policy duties, whereas the ERC, as you might know, funds research in all scientific fields and basically, therefore, cover everything, if you will. So how did we approach this? We do it by looking, of course, at the European Commission main priorities, political priorities, and we do portfolio analysis of what do we have of research that can feed information into this. And one of those is democracy, of course. And therefore, we did a search in our giant database of all the projects we have funded using a string of keywords related to democracy. And we came up with 215 projects that we have presented in this report. Now, we don't actually present all 215, as that would be a bit difficult, but we present a selection of them in the chapters that are shown here on the screen. And you might not be very surprised when I say that many of these obviously tackle the question about digitalization and what it means for democracy, both in terms of the threats and the concerns that it raises, but also the possibilities in terms of citizen engagement, et cetera, et cetera. And what I wanted to do today was just to give you a bit of a flavor of some of the projects. Of course, it's always tricky to present other people's research, but I'll give it a go, and then I would like to invite you to also look more into the projects. The first one that I wanted to highlight that I personally think is extremely interesting because it looks very much as how datafication and big data can actually both be something to resist, but can also be very much the source of or the tool for political activism. And this project is called Data Active, the Politics of Data According to Civil Society. And it was run by, so it lasted from 15 to 21, and it was run by Stefania Milan from Amsterdam University. And basically what they did was they examined the connection between civil society and political activists and big data. They interviewed, I think it was around 250, both activists and also human rights defenders. And they did also online and in real life observations of political activists. And they wanted to explore exactly what do these human rights defenders and political activists actually do with big data infrastructure? How do they use it? And they come up with the term digital activism or data activism to describe exactly what they discovered. Namely that big data and datafication are used both as a tool and also as something to resist and protest. More specifically, resistance against loss of control. This can be, of course, what we know very well, data privacy concerns, facial recognition, discrimination in algorithm, and so forth. But also what they discovered was the many forms where they're used as a tool, big data, in particular open data, to support political activism. And some example of this are, of course, the open parliamentary data on MPs' voting behaviors, for example, the voting history, also their speeches that they then made more accessible and searchable and presented in a more, how to say, narrative way for people to better access it and use it. Or, you know, the access to campaign finance records that were used to track lobbyism, for example, that were used to also expose corruption and promote campaign reforms. Or the use of satellite data, for example, to track deforestation. So if you're interested in this, I would invite you to go and check out this project. Maybe we're getting the slides after this session, so you could go and have a look in more detail. Of course, in the interest of time, I can only highlight so little. The next project that I wanted to highlight is this Data Justice project that was led by Lynette Taylor from Tilburg Institute for Law, Technology and Society. This one ran from 2018 to 23. And of course, as we know, democracy is also very much about the protection of civil rights and citizens' interest more generally. And they did a huge empirical research into how people across the world, both the global north and the global south, are actually using big data infrastructure. And they were quite interested in seeing the way that people used it and also in what way then do we need to develop a framework for protecting the interest of these users. And building on all their empirical research, they then built or developed a framework for data justice that both integrate concerns such as data privacy concerns, but also more positive freedoms in terms of representation, for example, in big data and algorithm and data access. I think that what is really interesting about this project is actually some of the empirical case studies that they have, and I would invite you to go on their website. Both projects, even if they are the ERC funding has ended, they have continued their line of research with other funding, and the website is still very active. So I would invite you to go and visit it. It tends to skip this one. Here we go. The last one I wanted to highlight, which perhaps you know, is called Comprop, and this was led by Philip Howard of Oxford University, and it ran from 2016 to 20, so it's a little bit older, but it was one of the first sort of main ERC-funded research projects that looked into really thoroughly analyzed the spread of misinformation on social media, focusing around election periods, referenda, and political conflicts. And so more specifically, they analyzed both what was then called Twitter and Facebook, and they mapped the origins and spread of fake news around the 2018 US midterm election and around Brexit. And basically what they found is that even quite simple bots, they actually managed to keep the spread of fake news around for much, much longer, and that it manages to target journalists and civil society, and the fact that they operate with very little oversight, in fact. So one of the main sort of messages from Phil Howard was also that, you know, we're long past the point of self-regulation by big tech firms. Policies are really needed for regulating this. And this is not even a new message, right? This is something that he said in the beginning of his project. What they did was they used their findings to inform and guide policymakers in various countries, including in the EU, the UK, and the US. And they actually got additional funding to also develop a tool that they called BotFind, which helps detect fake news online and also help detect news spreading from unreliable sources. And they're still, you know, also continuing the same line of research, and I would invite you to also go and check out their website for more specifics about their research. Oops, again. Here we go. In the interest of time, I won't have the time to tell you about all these projects, but I wanted to give you a little bit of the flavor of just some of the other projects in the report, because you see a clear pattern, no, in terms of what we're talking about, both the spread of disinformation and the risks that are linked to digitalization. And you see here, for example, projects, many other projects that also deal with the fake news detection, but also looking into why are people, what are the reasons that some people are more susceptible to fake news than others. One project looks in particular at how people then, what characteristics of people that help spread the fake news and how that travels across social media. But also a project that looks very much into how are the increased use of social media actually impacting people's news consumption, not only the news consumption that happens on social media, but also how does it impact traditional media's way of communicating. So with that said, I just wanted to encourage you to look at our report and dive into the projects. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Hannah. And can I invite you all to join me on the panel? What I would like to do now is, you can sit as you want, there are no preferences here. What I would like to do is actually to give 5 minutes to the other 3 panelists to introduce themselves and say 2 words in line of what we've been discussing. And then we will have a panel discussion. I will also count on you and your questions, because I would like to have you, your voice from the floor. So I will also, at a certain point, turn to gather your questions. So start preparing them. Right. Simone, shall we start from you, the far end?
Why not?
Please, can you introduce yourself for 5 minutes about what you do and the importance of this research in the work that you, in DG employment, actually, you've been pursuing?
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes,
yep.
I think so. It's really a pleasure to be here today and to be listening to this different presentation, a bit more fresh than what we have inside the walls of the Commission. It was nice. So my name is Simone Rosini. I'm team leader at DG Employment, and I work on Horizon Europe since before its launch, so 2018. And yeah, we have been trying along the years to bring more of a social dimension to the program, which I think is very easy to reflect in the democracy and technology side. I mean, in the presentation you show, Andreas, there was like the first item as a threat, the things, elements that can lead to erosion of democracy or something like this was, you highlighted the first, but the second was like economic and social inequalities. So indeed, these elements are extremely, extremely connected among them. And especially I've been working on cluster 2, which has 3 blocks, as some of you may know. One is democracy and governance, one is cultural heritage and creative industries, and the third one is social and economic transformations. And these 3 blocks are, I think, obviously interconnected. And we believe that without having a social model that works, we cannot uphold the system of values for which Europe was born and that Europe is striving for. So I think that, but I'm not alone. I mean, even the Draghi report that talks about competitiveness takes the social model and the high level of education that we have as a prerequisite in order to build all the competitiveness and increasing productivity that are supposed to keep Europe competitive in the coming decades. And in this, our role is to not only fund research, but is also, and I think preeminently in my role, to try to pass and translate what we have been funding to what our policies are. And it is a challenge because, you know, a political cycle in the Commission lasts 5 years, and programming cycle lasts 7. They are not always aligned. And project cycles are typically, in our field, 3 to 4 years, which become 6 or 7 anyway, because by the moment you start thinking about what are our priorities, to the moment you discuss with other services at the Commission, with member states, receiving input by stakeholders, like you in the room, you in the podium, discussion at every level. It takes 2 years from the idea of what you want to have in the call for proposal, and what we call topics in Horizon Europe, to the evaluation, to the launch of the projects. I mean, it's 2 years, 2 years and a half, and then 3 to 4 years projects that are normally backloaded. So it is a big challenge. And there are elements that we cannot know upfront. On the other hand, it's extremely satisfactory when you manage to do something that makes sense, and when you see that you contribute to pass this knowledge that has been created by a vibrant SSH community here in Europe to policy making. I will just give 2 examples, which is one took place in June, and it was like this event on inequality and social protection. We had results and evidence from 12 different projects, funded not only by Cluster 2, but also by its predecessor in Horizon 2020, so the Challenge 6. And we had policymakers, and this was extremely timely because, you know, Europe is launching under the second mandate of Ursula von der Leyen the first ever anti-poverty strategy. So even if it was almost, even if in 2018, 2017, when the last work program of Horizon 2020 was launched, even in 2020, when we were preparing the work program, we couldn't know that 5 years afterwards, there will be this initiative. Having distributed our eggs in different boxes, we had this very good link, and now the colleagues that are working on the anti-poverty strategy have had the possibility to exchange, interact, and getting the knowledge from researchers. So, and we're trying to do the same in the skills domain. In 2 weeks, we will have a policy roundtable between policymakers and researchers in the field of education and skills. So it's not easy. There are challenges, but I think if we don't, in a way, continue to do something that Europe is doing in an excellent way, and I think that the European social model is among the very, very best you can have in Europe. If we give up on our soul, on what we are right now, we just lose the compass, we lose the way, without having the possibility to become an excellence and a point of reference in other fields that right now are a bit beyond us and a bit out of our reach. I'm not saying we cannot reach a level of world excellence in other fields. I'm just saying if we lose our capacity here, which is a prerequisite to manage to reach our objectives, our goals that are sometimes very ambitious, I don't think how this can happen.
Thank you, Simone.
Am I within the 5 minutes?
Yes, perfect.
Okay,
And thank you. And social science, human research, the global comparative advantage of Europe, for Europe. I like that for sure. Sanna, you probably work exactly on a similar line of this translation, and you've been doing a report recently on along similar practice than Simone was mentioning. Please.
Exactly. And we're going to see if everyone hears me. Perfect. Thanks a lot, Gabby, and thanks to the organizers for the invitation today, and thank you in the audience as well for being here. It's been really interesting to listen to everyone this far, and just where I come from. So I represent 3 universities from Stockholm. So it's a university alliance called Stockholm Trio. We have the Karolinska Institute, KTH Royal Institute of Technology, and Stockholm University, who has joined in, among other things, the Brussels office, which I represent. And here in Brussels, we work on research and innovation policy. You will hear from the points that I will raise that the focus we really have is Horizon Europe. Thank you, Gabby. Pillar 2, and the collaborative projects that we really focus on. But as you also mentioned, we do consultation input, or the commission consultation that they call for. And when we do this, we also call for input from the researchers, because we're also part of the research and support offices back home. So we're sort of the extended arm of the grants offices, which is an important aspect, making us close to the researchers and their work and their input as well. And as mentioned as well, last year we held a conference on SSH integration, and we had a report coming out of this seminar as well. And I believe this is one of the reasons I'm here today. And I thought I'd just get back to this report and raise a few of the points that we raised here, and that I hope will contribute to the discussion as well. So it was highlighted the funding system, and it has already been mentioned, but the period and for the long-term funding that is needed as well. And this is something that we call for, and which is also predictable for the participants. And this is to build understanding and trust as well, which takes time. So this is an important aspect. Another aspect that we raised was the evaluation. And for those of you who went to the R&I days last week or tuned in, evaluation panels was also raised during this. And in one of the sessions that I went to, it was a call for more industry focus in the panels. From our side, a university perspective, we called for more SSH in our report in the panels. And here I just believe we can all do some work on this to contribute to it, where there is the participants portal. So if you're not in it, sign up and also spread the word. Because this is where it starts to enhance the topics in the panels. And then we'll see for FP10 what will happen with the panels, but that's a different session. And just my last point from our report is something that has been said many times, but I believe the message is still the same. But as we've also mentioned, Gabby, it's the method that is the big question, really. So it's when we talk about collaborative projects, and I'll get back to this, but SSH is many times added and ending up as a nice add-on than really being integrated. So this is also continuing to integrate, and finding a method that works for this is something we call for in the report. And just to round off then, taking the opportunity to raise a project which is called KTH Live-in Lab in Stockholm. And this is several different buildings that research is being done on. They're working as test beds. They have different purposes, everything from offices to housing. And with the multiple test beds, it's also multi-sectoral, interdisciplinary, and the name live-in is explained by the fact that around 300 student apartments are part of this, and also those living in it, making them able to give feedback and input on new tech and new services that is being tested and implemented. So just to summarize, then long-term and predictable funding is necessary from our perspective. Projects breaking down silos, and science for policy, that is simply put, listen to the scientists, and the kind reminder on the participants portal to sign up and to spread the word. So that's it from me for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanna. And last but not least, our JRC. JRC is doing a very ambitious program in 3 phases. So, Mario, could you join us?
Yes, absolutely. And many thanks for the invitation. Happy to be here with you. I just came from across the street in the Ballymun, where we have a big workshop on disinformation and the impact on democracy. So a lot of the research that I saw here matters a lot for this topic as well. For those who don't know us, the JRC is the knowledge service of the European Commission within the European Commission. So we see ourselves as knowledge brokers, as a terminology that may have come up before. So we do our own research as well, but very often we are engaged in synthesizing and bringing together sciences from different, or results from different areas, so that we can advise policymakers what to do better. And I love to start with saying this, because very often when I'm at events like this, researchers tell me like, oh yeah, my research is really not listened to. I have so many insights. No one ever asks me personally what I think about politics or policies. And that's very often not how it works. There are experts who are having the role of synthesizing this, translating this. What does it mean for the current political environment? What is feasible? What can we do? And that is partially our work, but there are also many others. We heard from the colleague on the feedback to policy. That's also part of this. I specifically work in the team for Science for Democracy and Evidence-Informed Policymaking. So we even more look into how we can improve this uptake of scientific evidence in general at the EU level, but also member state level. So we advise several member states now in a new project again on how to improve the ecosystem of science for policy. As you mentioned, science for policy is this kind of thing that no one really knows until they did it, because it's not science policy. It's all about how scientific evidence ends up in the hands of the right person that takes decisions or prepares decisions. And that's extremely important and goes beyond purely funding. It goes into understanding what policymakers do, how they, what their pressures and daily activities are, and what they need to deal with, and then being able to synthesize, translate evidence for that. But I think I'm invited for the other part of what I'm doing, namely the Science on Democracy, where currently I'm leading a project on an update of a previous report on technology and democracy, namely how does technology really influence the way we're seeing our democratic institutions battle with the effects, because it's mostly negative. We heard some good points on the positive angles. But just to conclude on that initial statement, we did a global survey, or mostly focusing on the EU, with the International Panel of Information Environments, together with Phil Howard, the name you heard before. And some of you may have even answered that survey. The results just came in last week on a foresight study we did 5 years ago, thinking about what is the current scenario of the information environment relating to our democracy, where we looked at 2 main angles, namely the collaboration angle, do we work together as an international community, and the angle of are we open or closed related to our economy and our perspectives. And we see very, very clear signs that the expert gave us. We are currently in the scenario of global struggle for information supremacy. You don't potentially need a study to tell you this, because we read it in the news every day. But what does it mean? It means that purely thinking about issues like dis and misinformation and how we can battle this is not enough. We need a new approach to understanding the whole ecosystem, which includes, of course, social media platforms, other platforms, AI, gaming platforms that we heard of before, and understand how they work so that we understand what information is reaching everyone and how they interact with that information. Because it's not only important to know what information is out there, but how does it land with people? How do they absorb it? And we see a huge change in that in recent decades, away from an ecosystem of we all have kind of a shared understanding of reality and we may disagree on some aspects, to people thinking, well, I have the key to knowing what reality is, and I don't need to listen to any shared reality anymore, because that's how the system is designed to make us think. And yeah, that's the background of what we do at the moment.
Well, thank you, Mario. Thank you very much to all of you. And actually, I have to admit, I'm slightly confused, really. With fantastic research, seems to reach policymakers, seems to be critical in decision-making. And yet, how does it make us competitive? We had a panel this morning. There has been a word about society this morning. Does anyone even mention it? I don't seem to have heard anything. And when we discuss the framework program 10 at the moment, the proposal, there is a word, society, literally is a word with three items underneath, which it says societal challenges and missions, and the new European Bauhaus facility, and no other contents. And this is the smallest budget they could even think to allocate, 7.6 billion. So I don't understand. I mean, you seem to be all very convinced that this research is the core and the comparative advantages Simone mentioned of Europe on a global scale, and yet there's nothing there. So how does that make it competitive? Does it make it competitive, this type of research? I mean, to be honest, there are democracies that say we don't really need all of that, but that democracy has said that we don't really need much. We don't need the communities to come along with us and just tell them what to do. China would be quite happy to say, well, tell them what to do. That's what makes us strong, economic growth, competitive. So can you help me here? Does anybody wants to go ahead with some help? Because I'm not so sure what to do. What do you think? Why we're here? And why are you all here, guys? The question is for you too. So is this research important? Does it make us more competitive? Is it worthwhile? And why?
I may start. So again, my point is, how can we have good technological developments, which is like what we do not compete on prices from Europe, no? We compete with high quality stuff. We have to go in the niche and you have to reach the high-end market. Our salaries are too high to compete otherwise. You can only do that if you have good people, good experts in the different fields that are able to develop something which is new. Still nowadays, Europe is having a lot of intellectual property and new developments that are being registered every year. I mean, this is a symptom and that our economic system works and is well alive. And without having a system that allows to reduce inequality, that allows everyone, also from the poorer people, to go to the universities and to have scholarship to climb up, this will be simply impossible. We are tiny in the world scale. We are less than half a billion people in a world that is every day bigger. So once we could storm the world even by numbers. Now we cannot. Now we are a niche in the terms of the population. We are 5%, a bit more, 8%, I think, of the world population. And so we have to do the most that we can with the few resources that we have in a changing environment. If we don't manage to make as many people in the labor market, as many people in the universities, and expand our limited resources to try to find the genius and the smart guys that will develop something, and then that will create innovation that then can lead other sectors like we did in the past, in my opinion, we are fighting a war that we cannot simply win. If we are just trying to follow the developments of the other people that are developed somewhere else in the world. Sorry, we will just be followers, and I don't see how our economic model can simply sustain itself.
So defending equality to maximize potentials. That's your line.
That's my take, but...
But please, Mario, you seem to have something on your lips.
Yeah, I don't know. Commission shouldn't dominate this, but indeed,
okay.
I think there are several elements to this. On the one hand, also probably in this direction is, what skills do we need for that? What is and the research can tell us in which areas do we need skills, also developing the skills, not only telling us where, but also the teaching at universities. It sometimes is a bit under discussed in these panels. That is essential. If people learn the skills that are needed, not only for work, but also for how to deal with, in the democratic sense, participate in democracy, all of those elements are extremely crucial, and they are done in universities with top of the class professors, researchers who can tell us what is needed. That's a very important dimension. The other thing is on competitiveness. We do need to accept that we have a different global economic dynamism than we had perhaps even a few years ago. And that in that sense, if we want to maintain the way we defend our values, we need to understand what it takes. Now, competitiveness is one answer that has been brought up, also as a response to voting results. I mean, we need to respond to what people vote for, and if they vote for parties that make this their campaign, then that's something that we should probably listen to. So it is democratic in that sense, but the question is competitiveness in what direction? When we had this previous conversation on the scale, we see in the US, for example, as a comparison, some sectors are no longer wanted. And they are in areas where I also see competitive advantages for us in the future. mRNA research is not only social science research, this is research that will no longer happen there. And so I don't think that we have to be too afraid of that either. Yes, there is a global competition, but there are areas where intellectual freedom, freedom to do the research that is needed will help us as well. But yeah, it goes along with the global setting.
I have a question for the researchers who have presented some really interesting results. The scale of the investment of social science humanities is always extremely limited compared to other fields of research. Technically, from the perspective of investment, there's no reason European funding fund salary, travel, conference, which are not disciplinary biased. Yet, we see a very big imbalance. Would it be the time to discuss a much more ambitious program to scale up, for example, your Norwegian case studies, to scale it up, collecting not maybe in 27 of the European countries, but a larger proportion. So the collaboration areas of research, the collaborative program that we got currently in Horizon Europe 1, they are proposing in Horizon Europe 2, been scaling up this type of research for some answers. Would that be a case? Or it's okay, we can still with our little budget and we're happy with it? No, I mean, it's a real genuine question.
I would call that a slightly leading question,
okay,
especially to a panel of people doing social science.
Well,
yes.
If you go the director of the European Alliance of Social Science Humanities.
For me, the answer is absolutely yes, of course. When too much focus becomes on thinking about like what technologies we should have and develop because then give us competitive edge and can bring in money, and not enough about the regulations and the institutions and the peoples and the skills that are needed to actually use these technologies, it's not going to work out. And we've seen this in sustainability research for a long time. We've had lots of technical solutions for a long time that we are unable to implement because we don't have the knowledge and also political power to implement and to deal with the social aspects of the changes we're experiencing. So yes, now it's definitely, it was a good time 10 years ago and 20 years ago too, but it's definitely a good time today.
Yeah, if I may add to that, it's interesting that you bring that up, because basically what would be the extension of what we did in our Norwegian environment, that is basically what I briefly showed also from the European election study. And interesting, the one that I showed you here from 24, that was not institutionally funded at all. So the researchers, they tried, I guess they tried ERC, all the national research foundations. Nobody wanted to fund that. And that is running for I don't know how long. So it would have been really a pity to lose this then 24 edition. So what they did, they crowdsourced funded it, right? So they funded it themselves. So they asked around in the research community, hey, who has some money to chip in? Because as you say, in the end, our research is relatively cheap, right? We get those things done for, I don't know, maybe the whole European election study is maybe, I don't know, 200,000 euros or something, just to put out a number. I mean, if you go to the natural sciences, if they buy a laser, yeah, that costs millions, right? So,
big data that definitely influence and impact on everybody's science. The way we do science today is not the way we used to do it even 10 years ago. And Anna, you have the privilege to give a very good size of, well, there's no difference in ERC in size of grant, so there's no discrimination by discipline in terms of the size of grant.
That's true.
In terms of, as you were talking about working with this unit with impact on policy, how is your perception about how this research pay back, let's say, in terms of feeding into policy, feeding in our world, feeding in our competitiveness as a continent at a larger scale?
Well, I think there is different things that I wanted to highlight. One is that there's a tendency, of course, to look at the ERC as this, which it is, right? Blue sky research and it's research for the sake of research and scientific advancement. But I think that and there is a tendency to make the distinction between fundamental research and applied research. And I think that what might actually surprise many people is that ERC funds a lot of applied research as well. It ends up being applied in many cases. It's also true that if we have the proof of concept grants that many people might know of as well, that goes to grantees that already have a project and they want to then either bring something to the market, or it can also be social innovation that they want to develop further. So it doesn't necessarily have to be something that is marketable only. It can also be something that feeds into policy, for example. And so I think that one of the things that I wanted to say is that when you were talking about what does it mean for democracy, obviously a stable democracy is important for also ensuring the freedom to research. I mean, this is something that in this day and age we shouldn't take for granted, as we see very close to us, no? So if you want actually a research community that stays also, let's say, competitive or contributes to competitiveness, you need democracy to ensure the freedom to pursue, and here I come again with the ERC jargon, the bright ideas, you know, that we like to fund. So, yeah.
Thank you. And can I turn to the audience? I got a question here and a question here. Sorry, there was a question there first.
Hi, good morning or good afternoon. I'm Dr. Anusha Panjwani. I'm the head of science at COST, which is the European Cooperation of Science and Technology. For those of you who mentioned your research hasn't been funded by ERC, just a quick, not a plug, but consider COST. It's a low barrier entry and high leverage platform. If you want to have a chat with me, grab me during lunch. Now onto my question. The citizen side to me and the scientist/policymaker side to me are in conflict. It's for the following reason, and I wonder what your thoughts are on this. We know that technology grows at a fast pace, yet we know that by the time regulations, policy catch up, the technology has moved on. So how do we square the circle? And I'm aware of some of the challenges of science for policy, policy for science, the role of knowledge brokers. Mario mentioned some other points as well. How do we ensure that if in the EU we want to be where we stroke and, within quotations, our ambition lies, that policy and regulation keeps up to date with technology at the current pace, so we as the EU can truly respond to contemporary pressures and not pressures from 2020 or 2002, because that time has moved on. And this ties into a number of things, not just competitiveness, but also our values. And it's also linked in to this idea that we have on innovation. If we only think, oh yeah, we are happy with a Fiat, you'll never end up with a Ferrari. Whereas when I worked in the US, the whole ideology was truly different. I'm not advocating for a crisis or for us to be America at all, but I wonder where your thoughts are on two different aspects to my question. Thank you.
And I will collect there are another couple of questions. Mary here. And
I don't have a question. I have an answer to the question you asked. What are we all doing here? And I can give it at the end before this question is taken, or I can just say it now.
No, just go ahead.
What are we all doing here? I think we heard so many nice things, and they're just a tiny bit that proves why we shouldn't be doing all this campaigning to convince politicians, policymakers, and investors that there is no industrial competitiveness without societal competitiveness. And that's the sad reality we are living in, that we have to prove through examples and through all these discussions. But we are here, we will keep on doing it, because obviously it's more than it. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Mary. And there's a question down there. And then we go back to the panel. Okay, so.
I'm Nicolae Tanasov, associate professor from Bulgarian University in Burgas. My question is about maybe for everyone, for your speakers and for auditory, if anyone wants to answer in your leading style for the democracy and for the freedom. What kind of the innovation investment could be more useful to stimulate, for example, skills, competitive skills and future skills? How to be this on high level of the excellent needs to stimulate research and innovations not only for the students and the youth, but for everyone, citizen, and not only in Europe. How we could meet new, very interesting challenges from the report of Mario Draghi to see new sizable priorities of the programs, scientific, innovative, educational, cultural program to see knowledge capitalization, to see new effects not only for the society and economy, but for the needs of the citizen to be free, not to be under AI commands, not to be under of the contradictions between data and knowledge. Attempt
Thank you.
New values of the new kind of digital culture.
Thank you. Well, we're going for conclusions, so please do answer to the question. We give 5 minutes each. Well, not 5 minutes, sorry, 1 minute each, because otherwise I'm going to be beaten up. 1 minute each to reply to the questions, and we'll definitely add the community sessions, because the question are also turned to the audience, so it's interesting that. Please, let me start from this end, and Christine, do you want to go first? And we close with the final comments.
I'm not sure how to answer both of those questions in 1 minute. I will instead use my 1 minute to say that
you can have 1.5. Come
okay,
on. I'm generous.
There it is. No. If I'm allowed, I want to say I think that the name of this session is about community. It is about our focus on the social aspects. We need to have them. And community seems kind of soft. It seems kind of whiffy, the thing that is nice to have. But it really is one of the things, if we don't have that, none of these other things will work. And if we don't put effort and resources into it, they will disappear.
Mario?
Very bleak. Okay, let me try to be, answering the questions in a useful, in a practical sense, because that's the only thing that I can say here. And drawing from lessons from a report we published this year, from a workshop on trust in science for policy that we did together with the International Science Council and the National Science Foundation in the US, when that was still possible. And one of the big lessons that came out of that, and I see in the daily life, is I love reading many social science papers that analyze problems, but there's often a lack of solutions. And there's often a lack of, what does that mean now for the next steps? And I get that feedback very often from the colleagues in the policymaking community. It's like, oh, this is wonderful, but now what? And that happens very often. That is, analysis is over the recommendations, what do we do next? Where do we look for solutions? And that needs to be strengthened if it is supposed to be relevant for science, for policy specifically. Not for competitiveness, that's a different thing. But in terms of solutions, what we suggested in there was that we need more exchange methods, and I go beyond like a conference like this. I mean, this is nice, we listen to each other, and then we go back to our communities and do what we always do, research paper in front of our computers, but rather exchange programs. Come and see what the daily work and hassle of a policymaker is, who has to deal with so many conflicting demands, trade-offs, to find the perfect solution that is then also accepted by so many member states or communities. It's really hard. It's really a challenge. And if we have more of those practical exchange programs, we have this in the Marie Curie programs, that is possible. You can come to us, even in JRC. We're now getting two new ones. Because I think that makes the research much more practical and then applicable to the situation, and therefore also raises the appreciation of policymakers for, oh, that's what we do. Oh, that's what we can do with it. So that's my practical suggestion to that.
More funding for translational research. I like that.
More exchange, not translational research on one side.
Yes,
it's the interaction that's needed.
Perfect.
Sorry,
and this is a very good point. Sana.
Many things that come to mind, and I'll just build a bit on what you just mentioned, but also what we refer to in our report is a joint master's program, for instance, which is interdisciplinary, so start early on as well to foster collaboration for the future, I believe. Another just thought coming to mind, which is a whole big discussion as well, but democracy is slow for a reason, and I think we need to remember that as well. It has safeguards in it in that sense. So if it goes too fast, what do we create instead? So that's also just, sometimes it's good to take a step back, maybe take a deep breath and actually think a bit, which is difficult at times because things are going fast. I don't know if this is replying to the questions, but I also believe COST is an excellent program. So it's good that was mentioned, and something that we have been encouraging researchers to join, as it is the first step in for many to the EU arena, so to say. So that's also a very good experience that we have with that.
Thank you, Sana.
Yes, I'm not sure whether I will answer any question, but at least what I want to say at the end, and obviously I'm a public opinion scholar, so I'm a bit biased, so I obviously think it's important, that kind of research also, but I guess whatever we, the EU, will decide to increase or keep the competitiveness, I mean, one has to take the people along, right? And there will be then certain measures that will benefit or not benefit certain groups. And to just get an idea, okay, how do people perceive whatever we introduce? To identify that, I think just as public opinion research is relevant to also come up with the right measures to communicate why do we do certain things in a given way and not in another way, to not lose the people on whatever we have to introduce for staying competitive in the future.
And strengthening interdisciplinarity, then. Anne.
Yeah, I want to take the opportunity to just say that, we have been talking about also the speed with which research might actually feed into policy, and for the top-down programs, I think there's a lot of positive things in the fact that you can be very specific in terms of what type of knowledge you need, but it also takes some time, no? Because the project also needs to run before it has results that can feed in, and whoopty, 5 years pass by, right? And we were quite happy also in the light of FP10 discussions that, various important actors has been focusing on the need also of fundamental research, because research does take time, and if you want to arrive at innovation, you need to be patient also. And that said, I feel that there's a good sort of interplay between the top-down and the bottom-up, because whenever we have a request for a policy DG, we can always tap into a database of already existing research that wasn't there because someone thought they needed it, but because someone thought, this is not known in the world, let me explore it. So there's almost no area where we can't pick out research that has been funded that can answer at least partly some of the policy issues that are burning today. So I think, you know, I'm quite happy to see that for FP10 it looks like there will be a sound balance. We hope.
Sorry, I didn't say anything.
No, but I saw the look on your face between top-down and bottom-up research.
Well, it's also because compared to STEM, there's no an incremental type of research.
Yes.
Society is in constant evolution and changes, and you can't take it for granted that what it was funded yesterday, even if a reproducer will give it the same result. So we need to understand also, in the sense that this discipline have a very different contribution in a way that you can go back to similar thematic areas and get very different results because people change over time. Simone, you're the last word.
Thank you so much. Wow.
You're the first and the last.
No, but yeah, I agree 100% with what Anne just said. And in terms of the skills and a bit the speed, no? I think that skills, we invested a lot. I think it's the part in the part of cluster 2 is one of the areas in which we invested the most. I think it's a complicated issue because of course, skills are very sector specific. So I think that the best you can do is really to have people working in the different sectors, and this is what we are trying to foster with our research, with people working in training institutions together, creating a system. It's also important to remember this system has to be very specific and at the same time large enough. Because, and this is even stricter with education, but while competition or international trade are competence of EU, exclusive EU competence, the social domain is shared competence. And so you need to have people on board from the member states and in some regions, in some member states at regional level, because the training provision is at regional level. So, you need to have them on board, and we thought after some years that the easy way to have people in these decision points to be on board with research is that they have to be involved from the very beginning. It was said also in the initial panel. How did we try to do this? We try to do it with this partnership that we have in mind that is going to launch soon. On societal transformation and resilience. What is a partnership is a tool foreseen under Horizon Europe and previous programs where 30% is money given by us and 70% are money given by the different member states. What does this mean? That these ministers that should think and upgrade education and training are paying for this, and they see the value for this. And we noticed that sometimes when you see the value, when you have to put money, you pay more attention. And so I think it was a good sign that there was a lot of enthusiasm and people are on board. It would be almost 200 million. And I think this is a way in which we can reach this, to have different stakeholders on board, that they know the problem and they have research there. Because if you talk with a policymaker at national level, and you just say to him, we have a paper funded by Horizon Europe on how you can improve your education system. This person will more often than not just scoff, because I mean, okay, how many people are pitching them with the idea for modernizing? And also, we think that this is slightly more fast than the normal call for proposal system, because the call for proposal in the partnership are slightly faster. And so in a way, of course, it's one way to move in this direction. And the other way is investing in different spheres. Again, you have to cover different areas. You cannot say now for sure what will be the policy priorities in 10 years, because the world is faster than ever. And so you have to try to cover different angles, and hopefully, some of the research are finding now, it will be useful in 5 years. And some of them, obviously, you know, the demographic crisis, more or less, you know the trend. So the research you make there. But this time, I went beyond the 90 seconds.
Well, thank you. Let me thank you, the panel, It's been brilliant. And let me do a special thank you to Caroline, who's been working relentlessly for this session. And I really appreciate all your work and they put in there. And just one little advertising second. By the end of this week, we will publish as the European Alliance of Social Science and Humanities our feedback on the proposal the Commission have published in July on Framework Programme 10, which is called Society is for Research on Societies. So I will invite you all to read it if you can. Thank you.
Does this work? I will soon let you go for lunch, but I also want to thank you for showing up and for participating and asking questions. We could probably have had much more questions also. And thanks to Gabi, the moderator, and to all speakers. And you can leave, but I will give them gifts. Thank you.